Hello everybody, welcome to Blue Marble Science. Why can't sleeping warrior Cavendish? I guess it's because there's just no place to put the egg. Warning, severe facial and monitor damage alert is in effect. Get out the oven mitts, push the monitors back out of punching range, and let's light a dumpster fire and have some fun. Now we all know how desperate Sleeping Warrior has been to try to prove that gravity is not a thing. So Tony has decided to build a Cavendish contraption that doesn't work to somehow or the other prove that my Cavendish device doesn't work either. You know, making stuff that doesn't work isn't all that hard to do, Tony. It's like building a car with no engine in it and then saying, oh, look, cars don't work. Now, when he started out with this contraption that looks like this, he had a torsion wire that was not connected to anything at the top. In other words, he built a torsion balance that had no torsion element in it. Well, I think we finally convinced him that that was wrong, and now he seems to have fixed that issue. But he's claiming that he can't see any movement in his torsion balance. I wonder why that is. I think we'll look into that in just a minute. But he's been requesting that I do tests with my Cavendish, and some of it was very confusing to me. I didn't really understand what he was up to. There's been a really lengthy trail of emails back and forth between Anthony and myself. I'm going to share just a little bit of one of them with you. So here we go. Anthony had asked me to do a test where I put the weights in one position, let it run for 80 minutes, and then move the weights and let it run again for another 80 minutes. That's 160 minutes. I decided to do a little better than that for him. I set up a test and ran it for 100 minutes, both sides, and did a time lapse at the same time. Now, after the 200 minutes ran out and another 15 minutes passed, just chatting with people in the side chat and during the live stream, I decided to tap on the case a little bit to see if I could disturb the balance. And Tony is now pitching a fit about that, claiming I sabotaged the test. How did I sabotage the test, Tony? It was already over, and it had been over for 15 minutes beyond the period I chose and 55 minutes longer than the period you chose. Anyway, let's don't get bogged down in that. So now he wants me to rerun the test and extend the time period out to 120 minutes instead of 80 minutes where he started. All of this started me thinking, what is he really up to? So I wrote this. If you're thinking that the oscillation period has something to do with this measurement, it doesn't. It's a pendulum, and it oscillates like a vertical pendulum, except that rather than gravity providing the restoring force, torsion induced in the wire by the gravitational attraction of the masses provides the restoring force. Tony's response in red says, not one particular period, the accumulation over time of the oscillation periods. The more data, the better. Okay, fine. But I went on to say this. Like any pendulum, the period doesn't change with magnitude of the oscillation. And at this point, things went completely off the rail. Tony's response is, well, the period changes in both a pendulum and in your test. Tony, the period of a pendulum is constant regardless of what the magnitude is within some limits. When the deflection is relatively small, the period of a pendulum is constant. Then he says, the distance the laser moves and the time it takes to travel that distance also reduces. So the period is proportionally reducing in both cases. Anthony, that's just dumb. So let's skip down a little bit further. And I said, and before I do this, I want to know what you're looking for and how you're analyzing this data. Please be specific. And here's the zinger. Here's Anthony once again accusing me of being a liar and a cheat. He says, if I tell you what I'm looking for, how do I know you won't try and fudge the results to match the expectation? Anthony, please don't project your lack of character onto me. We all know you're willing to lie. That does not mean I am. And then he says, let's see how you react if I tell you this is the plotted data on today's test. And he shows me this graph. Well, I have no idea what he's plotting actually. It says on the y-axis oscillation length of laser dot in centimeters, what the hell ever that means. And then across the bottom we seem to have instructions for the Polish marching cadence. Right, 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 left, 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 left. Tony, what the hell are you doing? And then he provided this revelation. There are two clear rises in the data points. The 4.1 and 3.1, they are obvious. The first one is you rotating the balls. It does prove you are putting energy into the system, and this is why. Oh boy, I can't wait to see this one. All right, so what do we got? Arm holding one of the large masses. Yeah, got that. Rotation device for the arm holding the two large external masses is attached to the crossbeam. Check. I agree with that. The large external mass attached to the bottom of the rod. Well, there it is down there. And there's the rod. Check. Then he says the wooden case torsion system is clamped to the crossbeam. What? The wooden case containing the extremely sensitive torsion bar system. Tony, there is absolutely no connection between this case and this framework that suspends and rotates the large balls. None whatsoever. He says, in our torsion balance, our weights are totally independent from the structure, but yours are directly connected. No, sir, they are not. And there are tons of photographs and video of this system clearly showing that that is not the case. You're just making things up, Tony. He says, we see frequent vertical movements in your red dot laser that do show that the setup is transferring energy into the torsion bar. No, Tony, you see vertical movement of the laser when I'm adjusting the centering device to try to get it in the center. You don't see any vertical movement in this thing when I'm making measurements. And then he says, in Cavendish's original design, he also has a connected torsion bar. Oh my God. Down here at the bottom, the label GG is the wall of the building, but the main device is connected to the same structure like yours is. What the hell are you talking about? This is his building. The large weights, the large balls are suspended from this trapeze arrangement and from the roof of that building. There is no connection between the building and the box that he has his torsion balance in. The only thing even touching is his adjuster device, which he brought out through the outside wall of the building so that he didn't have to go inside to make any adjustments. Mine is right here, Tony. The little knob that I used to make that adjustment is right there. There's 6 inches of nothing but air between the top of this adjuster and the bottom of that crossbeam. And then he goes on to provide his data. Again, I have no idea what this means. Double tap is where I tapped on the casing that he's complaining about well after the test was over. And then he says, you can't see the energy gains in the raw data format. You need to graph it. Well, okay, Tony. Why don't we do that? Let me go down to the response. And I said this: there's nothing wrong with the data. You're being a crybaby, Anthony, and once again showing how little you know about this. This is what the actual data looks like plotted, and it's a perfect set of 5 damped oscillations, both sides, showing the clear and irrefutable effect of gravity. It won't get any prettier than that. So I'm not going to read the rest of that paragraph. Feel free to. What I will do is read this last sentence. And I said, now why are you hiding your test, Anthony? What are you trying to conceal? An honest man would provide the requested information as I've done. You are an honest man, aren't you, Anthony? No need to reply. We're done. Now, after seeing the graph, Tony comes back and says, can I please see the data set you're using to create the graph? Like I showed you our data we use for our graph, can I please see yours? Here's my response, Anthony. No, you can't. The data set is generated by Tracker video analysis software. Tracker actually tracks the position of a moving video object, in this case, the laser dot on the time lapse, and plots the position of the dot with respect to time. It's extremely precise and impossible to refute. The video file it used was the 200-minute time-lapse video, 40 minutes longer than you asked for, made during the live stream. I even showed the DSLR setup at about the 8-minute mark of the stream. I gave a link to that video in the description, and you're more than welcome to download it along with the Tracker software and do this yourself. That's all I'll tell you. As of now, I'm just as unwilling to show you any more of my data as you have been to share details of your device. This didn't need to turn ugly, but it has. And it has because of your constant accusations of cheating on my part. Are you guys getting the feeling that Big Blue is beginning to get a little aggravated? Oh yeah, I am. So that's enough of Anthony's whining. Let's have a look at the thing he's been working on and see if we can figure out what might be going wrong. Now, Anthony hasn't been willing to share any information to speak of about this device. All that he's provided that I know of is a 29 kilogram weight for each of these rolls of lead flashing you see. So since he won't tell us what this stuff is, let's just make some informed guesses and see what we come up with. To get a 29 kilogram roll of lead flashing like that, I figure the diameter OD of it must be around 120 millimeters. And the width of it is probably something like 300 millimeters. I don't know. It's an estimation on my part, but that's the best I can do. So if I use that 120 millimeter OD for the roll of flashing, which is pretty similar to the OD of that pipe at the top, which I think is a piece of sewer pipe, and that would make pretty good sense. Then the overall diameter of this container thing that he's got it in must be something like 600 millimeters. Close enough. And then I decided to see if I moved one of those rolls of lead into a position where it would be fairly close to the lead balls he has on his torsion balance. And then I put the blue oval there that's about the same size as the roll of lead flashing, separated about 180 millimeters, which seems to be about as close as you could get it to where his small balls would be hanging on the torsion beam, which is that white bar that's running sort of diagonal just to the right of the 2 dotted lines there. This is about the best I can do, given no information at all. So with this, can we do any sort of analysis? This is a spreadsheet that I use for my Cavendish. And I developed this spreadsheet before we ever started building Cavendish. It gives me the ability to put in the radius of each of the masses, like 7.74 centimeters for the big one and 2.54 centimeters for the little one. And it allows me to put in the gap between the masses, 4.29 centimeters in the case of my Cavendish. And from that, it calculates the available force for one side. And you see that down here as 85.84 nanonewtons. Now that force is transferred over here to the other side, to the right-hand side, where I specify the length of the beam, the diameter of the wire, the length of the wire, the modulus of rigidity, Young's modulus, for the material that's being used. And what it spits out is the total deflection in terms of 20ths of an inch in my case, because that's the Cavendish measurement. But it also gives us a laser deflection. Now, if you've been following the testing with the tungsten wire, we're getting 34 millimeters of laser deflection. The spreadsheet calculates 33.93 millimeters of deflection. This is really very accurate. Let's see what happens with Tony's mess. Now, I've taken out stuff in the spreadsheet that only pertain to my Cavendish and just left in the pertinent things that would pertain to what Tony's doing. He claims to have a 29 kilogram large mass. There it is, 29,000 grams. He won't tell us what the small balls are, so I'm guessing about 1.5 centimeters radius, which makes those about 160 grams apiece. I'm guessing that the gap between the masses can't be less than about 8 centimeters, because the center-to-center distance doesn't appear to be able to be any less than about 18 centimeters. That gives an available force on one side only of 9.6 nanonewtons. That's about a tenth of what we get with my Cavendish. So what does that mean? Well, I've assumed his beam length is 250 millimeters, and I have no idea what his torsion wire is. So let's just play with some numbers. Let's say his wire diameter is 3 thousandths of an inch. Keep in mind that the smallest one that I ever used was 7 thousandths of an inch. I'll give him a break on the wire length and say that his torsion wire is 1 meter in length, which is considerably longer than the one I'm using. I've put in the modulus of rigidity for steel. I have no idea what the material is that he's using. But using these numbers, Tony would expect to see a total deflection in one direction of 4.5 millimeters. That's how far his torsion balance will move at the end of the balance. 4.5 millimeters. And it's going to do that over a period of 28.95 minutes divided by 2, of course. That's the total period. But to see 4.5 millimeters of movement, he's got to sit there and watch that thing for 14 minutes. Now, for those of us who are metrically challenged, 4.5 millimeters of movement is less than 1/4 of an inch. That thing would never move more than 1/4 of an inch, and it would take 14 minutes for it to do it. And he has absolutely no method of measuring it. It's quite likely that you're not going to see that. But let's put maybe a more realistic number up here. Instead of 3 thousandths, let's say we used the most sensitive wire that I've used, a .007 inch steel wire. Then the total deflection is only 0.154 millimeters. You're not going to see that. Unless you've got a laser, there's no way in the world you're ever going to see that. Now that would drag the oscillation period down to 5.32 minutes, and that makes it a little bit easier to observe. But still, without this information, we have no way of knowing whether he should expect to see any movement or not. So what's the holdup, Anthony? Why are you being so secretive about this? I can prove that I can calculate this quite accurately. All you need to do is share the data on your design, and I'll stick it in this spreadsheet, and we'll see if it's even possible for you to see any movement given what you're doing. You know, I've pretty much had enough of being called a cheat and a liar by you, Anthony. It's time for you to put up or shut up. Show us some information on this thing that we're looking at on the screen. Tell us what you're doing, and we'll tell you whether it'll work or not. You building a device that won't work does not prove that the device I built won't work. And by the way, Anthony, when I said the data is pretty, it really is pretty. I'd have been happy to give this to you if you weren't being such a prick. There's the difference between the two oscillations, Anthony. 35 millimeters, just like advertised. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons down there. Tickle the little bell if you want notifications. And I guess I'll see you on the next one. Hey, shout out to the patrons and the PayPals. I appreciate it, guys. See you later.